My mother thought she could replace my father with her creepy new boyfriend and make me call him daddy today. She did not realize that I still had secret contact with my actual father even though I was only 13 then. My dad had been convicted for manslaughter 5 months ago after a terrible night at a local bar in our town. He called the police from the bar because he was not even drinking that night and I was actually there with him. He went into the bathroom and came out minutes later looking panicked and covered in bright red blood on him. He shouted for someone to call the police and they arrived very quickly, but they put him in heavy handcuffs. Without saying much, they took him away, and the next time I saw his face, he was sitting behind thick metal bars. It never made much sense to me because my father never had a single violent bone in his body or his spirit. He swore he did not do it, and the way my mother acted after the conviction made me feel even more suspicious. She brought home Brandon instantly and told me he was my new dad because the other one was clearly a monster. I was told that my dad was a killer who I needed to distance from for my own safety and my own future there. I was not sure what to believe until they got engaged and Brandon began staring at me while eating slowly. He said that I was growing up so fast and becoming very pretty while my mother just thought it was sweet. Even when I told her for the first time that he made my skin crawl, she told me I was being dramatic about it. She must have told him what I said because that night while she slept, he came into my room in the darkness. Brandon grabbed my wrist hard enough to leave dark marks and said, "You know what happens to naughty girls now?" I was terrified, but I knew I could not trust my mother with the truth, so I kept it a secret in my heart. I also started keeping a different secret by writing letters to my dad and hiding them in my textbook pages. I would mail them from my friend's house after school, and he would write back through the prison email system. I created an account without my mother knowing, but things got really bad one specific Thursday afternoon. I found out that she had changed my last name on all school records to Brandon's without even asking me first. That night, Brandon came into my room and sat on my bed and put his hand on my thigh while smiling at me. He said I should be grateful to have a dad who cares, but I pushed him off and locked myself in the bathroom. The letter I got back from my dad was on real paper, and parts of it were damp, as if he'd cried on it. Seeing that almost broke me, but I looked forward to the chance to see his face for his upcoming birthday. I enthusiastically asked my mother if I could visit him for just a few minutes, but she told me aloud no. She said we could not go because Brandon coincidentally had tickets for a car show on that exact weekend. He requested adjoining hotel rooms, and when I said dad was innocent, Brandon backhanded me across the face. My mother said nothing, and while I was sleeping in the hotel room, Brandon snuck in while he was very drunk. His hand went all the way, and I had never felt so disgusting or humiliated while traveling home later on. The week we returned, my mother found the hidden letters and burned them in the backyard while I watched. She took my bedroom door off its hinges for monitoring, and Brandon used this to watch me sleep every night. That was my breaking point, so I snuck into the library to send an hour-long email to the district office. 2 weeks later, I got a reply asking if I had checked where he said, and I went through every old email. I found a note telling me to go to the attic and look behind the radiator where he hid a special object. I waited until they went on a date night, and my hands shook while climbing into the dark and dusty attic. Behind the radiator, I found a plastic-wrapped journal with my father's handwriting written inside pages. It said he caught Lauren and Brandon sneaking off together weeks before his arrest at that local bar then. I heard the car pulling into the driveway, and my blood ran cold because they were back home very early now. I clutched the journal to my chest while I heard Brandon's heavy footsteps on the stairs creaking loudly. I shoved it under my shirt, but his head appeared through the hole and his dark eyes locked onto mine there. I backed against the wall, and he grabbed my arm and yanked me toward the ladder while I held the journal. My mother was waiting at the bottom, and Brandon suggested they search my room for things I was hiding. I waited until they were snoring and hid the journal inside my pillowcase to keep the evidence safe then. The next morning, my mother made pancakes and Brandon kept staring at me while I pushed food on my plate. I excused myself to the bathroom and hid the journal in the toilet tank wrapped in a small plastic bag. On Monday, I snuck into the computer lab and took photos of each page with my phone to save the truth now. I uploaded everything to a cloud account and deleted the photos so that he would not find them later on. When I got home, he had flipped my mattress and dumped my drawers on the floor, asking where it was hidden. He smoothly lied to my mother that he was helping me reorganize, and she believed his fake smile again. Brandon moved the wedding up and installed a camera in the hallway to watch me at all times of the day. He took my phone at night, but I printed pages at school and hid them inside my locker behind textbooks. I remembered my Uncle Henry, who was my dad's best friend, and I called him from a payphone near school. We met at the library, and he looked at the journal photos with white knuckles and a very dark expression. He found a witness named Edward who saw Brandon go into the bathroom right before my dad that night then. Uncle Henry also found Caroline, the bartender, who said Brandon had been lurking around for many weeks. The manager named Brian had a backup security drive that recorded the hallway which nobody had checked. We watched the footage, and it showed Brandon entering at 9:47, while Dad entered much later. It was clear that Brandon had 4 minutes to set up the frame job, and Uncle Henry copied the footage. Brandon sensed something and threatened that accidents happen to people who sneak around in the dark. I retrieved the journal at 3 in the morning, but Brandon was standing in the hallway waiting for me. The next morning he found it and told my mother I was writing sick fantasy stories to break them apart. My mother believed him and said I needed to go to a strict boarding school to fix my problem behavior. I managed to call Uncle Henry, but Brandon found me and dragged me inside by my hair while yelling at me. He threw me against the wall and admitted he planned the whole thing and that he killed the man there. I was recording everything on a phone in my pocket while he bragged about how easy Mother was to trick. My mother walked in and heard his confession, and her face went white as she dropped groceries on the floor. She told him to get out, but he threatened her until she grabbed a kitchen knife to defend us both then. Brandon left and my mother collapsed on the floor, crying and apologizing for failing me and my father. I called Uncle Henry and the police arrived to watch the footage and listen to the recording of his crime. They found the real murder weapon in a lockbox in Brandon's trunk, and his fingerprints were on it now. Brandon confessed and revealed he was a predator who had done this in other states to other families. The judge ordered my dad's immediate release, and we drove to the prison gates to pick him up after months. I ran to him and hugged him tighter than ever before because I never stopped believing in his heart now. We got home and he stood in the doorway for a minute looking around like he was memorizing everything. I found him in the kitchen making coffee with shaking hands because he could not sleep in his own bed. The next few days were a blur of lawyers and paperwork to get his record completely cleared of charges. My mother moved out after 2 weeks because the tension in the room was suffocating for all of us then. The divorce papers came a month later. My father signed them without even reading the fine print now. My father started working construction with Uncle Henry because manual labor helped clear his head daily. I had to testify at a pretrial hearing, and the judge had to call a recess because I was crying so hard. Brandon sat in an orange jumpsuit looking smaller than I remembered while the jury heard the recording. The jury found him guilty on all counts, including murder, and he was sentenced to life without parole then. We ate at his favorite restaurant in silence and felt relieved that the monster was gone for good today. I started seeing a therapist who taught me that I was brave and that the nightmares would eventually stop. My father and I developed new routines like Sunday breakfast and movie nights to rebuild our family bond. A year later, Dad got a settlement for wrongful imprisonment which paid for the house and my college fund. He threw me a big party for my 15th birthday and we felt like a normal family for the first time. I got into college on a full scholarship to study criminal justice and my father cried at the graduation. We sat on the porch swing watching fireflies and he told me he was proud of the woman I had become now. I am Brianna, and I know that fighting for the truth is the only way to truly survive the thickest fog.